Prince William reportedly had to go into full detective mode inside his own family after becoming concerned that someone was quietly changing King Charles's schedule and delaying important medical reports. Honestly, the alleged situation sounded less like a royal household and more like a corporate power struggle where the boss had no idea that crucial messages were being intercepted. That is where the story becomes seriously interesting. When William allegedly compared what he was being shown with what was actually happening behind palace doors, the contradictions reportedly began stacking up fast. Still, these claims have not been officially confirmed, so they should be treated as reports rather than proven facts. It was the middle of 2026 when the official royal schedule for the second half of the year was released. At first glance, everything appeared normal. State visits, receptions, memorial services, and the usual major events carried out by the monarchy. But William was reportedly sitting inside his private office at Kensington Palace, studying the schedule page by page, when something caught his attention. The Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda, a major visit to Canada, a national memorial service, and reception after reception still listed King Charles as the main host. Every major responsibility remained on Charles's shoulders. Yet by that point, royal doctors had reportedly advised the king to reduce his workload significantly. His treatment was continuing, and concerns about his energy were already known inside royal circles. William was staring at a schedule that could exhaust a completely healthy person. So why had almost nothing been handed over to him? Not the preparation, not the smaller appearances, and not even some of the secondary duties. From a practical point of view, the setup made little sense. If it had simply been an administrative mistake, one quick conversation should have fixed everything. Someone could have said, "Oh, sorry, we'll adjust that," and the matter would have ended there. But according to the story, that was not what happened. William reportedly contacted the Royal Coordination Office and requested an explanation. Instead of clear answers, he received vague statements. Officials allegedly told him, "Everything follows the latest instructions from the king." There were no details and no proper explanation, only a broad claim that everything was under control. Catherine, who had reportedly watched the tension grow, finally asked the most obvious question. "Have you asked them directly what's going on?" William's answer was simple. He had already tried, but the explanations did not match what he could see with his own eyes. He knew his father was exhausted. Charles still appeared in public with his determined smile and strong sense of duty, but the strain was allegedly becoming harder to hide. William reportedly noticed the slightly lowered shoulders after long ceremonies, the slower steps, and the way the familiar sharpness remained in Charles's eyes while the energy behind it appeared weaker. These were small details that perhaps only someone who knew him closely would notice. The heir to the throne was supposedly watching his father push himself beyond reasonable limits while the royal system refused to shift even part of the burden. At that point, William allegedly decided to investigate quietly. He formally requested the latest medical information concerning King Charles. According to the account, this was not unusual or improper. A long-standing process supposedly allowed the heir to receive enough information to help plan an appropriate royal workload. It was basic preparation, not some dramatic attempt to invade the king's privacy. But this time, the expected documents did not arrive. Days passed. A minor delay reportedly became a much longer one, and excuses began moving through the palace offices. That was when William allegedly realized he might not be dealing with ordinary confusion. He contacted the head of royal support directly and firmly stated that he needed the medical report that day. He explained that the request followed normal procedure and demanded to know why someone was creating an obstacle. The response was reportedly evasive again. Officials appeared to dance around the real question without giving William a clear reason. Feeling stonewalled, he instructed members of his trusted team to examine the palace's internal document flow. What they allegedly discovered was stunning. Recent health reports about the king, including test results, medical assessments, and recommendations to reduce his schedule, were reportedly being routed through Queen Camilla's office before reaching other departments. Every important document supposedly passed through the same office. If true, that would have represented a major change in how sensitive information was being handled. William reportedly told Catherine that the situation had moved beyond a simple administrative error. He was right to be concerned. If medical information about the reigning monarch was being delayed or filtered through one office, the issue was no longer paperwork. It was about who controlled access to the king. The consequences could have been serious. The whole purpose of sharing relevant health guidance with the heir was to help manage royal responsibilities and prevent unnecessary strain. Without timely information, William could not properly prepare or step in. Charles would continue being scheduled for events that doctors might have advised against. His exhaustion could increase, possible health risks could grow, and the person controlling the reports could indirectly control how quickly responsibilities moved toward William. That was not some minor palace disagreement. It potentially affected the gradual transfer of royal duties and the balance of power inside the monarchy. Accurate information must reach the right people at the right moment for the royal system to operate properly. If information was being held back, William was effectively being left in the dark, while Charles remained at the center of an increasingly demanding schedule. The alleged timeline makes the story even more explosive. Around 3 months before William reportedly discovered the document problem, the first medical assessment showing a noticeable decline in Charles' condition had supposedly reached the palace. According to the unconfirmed account, Camilla was inside her private office at Clarence House when she summoned several trusted aides. She allegedly instructed them that medical reports and proposals to adjust the king's schedule had to pass through her office before being distributed elsewhere. Her stated reasoning was reportedly that Charles's schedule needed to remain stable for as long as possible. On the surface, that could have sounded like an attempt to avoid disruption. Behind the scenes, however, it allegedly created a powerful checkpoint. Any document suggesting that Charles should reduce his duties, or that William should take on a larger role, would first be reviewed by Camilla's office. Proposals reportedly returned with vague explanations such as "needs the king's direct review," "not the right time," or "requires further consideration." Doctors and royal advisors were allegedly making practical recommendations for a gradual transfer of responsibilities. Yet those proposals appeared to stall one after another, disappearing into the palace machine without a final decision. The account suggests that Camilla feared an early increase in William's role could weaken the influence of her office. That remains an interpretation, not an established fact, but it would explain why the alleged delays focused specifically on proposals involving William. Camilla had spent years building her position beside Charles after surviving intense public criticism. A faster transition could have threatened the authority and stability she had finally gained within the institution. She also reportedly understood that William would hesitate to confront his father directly. He would not want to place Charles under additional emotional pressure while the king was undergoing treatment. According to the story, that hesitation became the opening. Charles remained at the center of major royal events, while the usual mechanisms for transferring work to William allegedly became jammed with delays and repeated reviews. If the allegations were accurate, the strategy was careful and methodical. Keep Charles working, keep William waiting, and keep control of the information moving between them. But there was one major problem. William had finally started following the paper trail and the plan was about to unravel. William reportedly refused to accept the vague responses and simply moved on. Instead, he kept digging. His trusted team carried out a detailed cross-check of schedules, internal emails, and document transfer timelines between royal offices. What they allegedly uncovered did not look like one harmless delay. Proposals recommending a reduced schedule for King Charles had reportedly been held back for days, and sometimes even weeks, before finally reaching him. Even more concerning, some documents appeared to have been edited. Entire sections recommending that William take responsibility for major duties had allegedly been removed. If the account is accurate, this was not one exhausted assistant making a careless mistake. The changes appeared repeated, organized, and aimed in the same direction. With every new document examined, the alleged pattern became harder to dismiss. Then came the development that completely changed the direction of the story. A long-serving royal secretary reportedly stepped forward with something William's team had not yet obtained: the original paperwork. This secretary had allegedly watched the unexplained changes unfold over several months. Instead of throwing away old schedules and draft documents, he quietly preserved them. These were supposedly the unedited versions showing that several important duties had originally been proposed for William before his name was crossed out or the relevant sections were changed. Keeping those originals was a sharp move. In a workplace where important documents appeared to be repeatedly altered, the secretary reportedly viewed the papers as protection for himself. If anyone later questioned what had happened, he would have proof that the final versions did not match the originals. The situation became personal when the secretary was reportedly ordered to leave his position completely. At that point, he allegedly decided that remaining silent would only protect the people responsible for the changes. He arranged a private meeting with William at a secure location away from the palace. There, the secretary handed William a folder containing the original schedules and draft documents. According to the story, he admitted that he had originally kept the material for his own protection but could no longer stay silent. William, he believed, needed to see the full truth, not the polished version that had moved through palace offices. That meeting became the major turning point. William supposedly now possessed original documents that appeared to show direct intervention connected to Camilla's office. This was no longer only about paperwork arriving late. The material allegedly showed actual edits that reduced or completely removed William's proposed role in significant royal events. William reportedly took the folder to Catherine and explained what his team had uncovered. Her response was calm but direct. She allegedly told him what he probably already understood. King Charles needed to see the evidence himself. Charles could not make sensible decisions while receiving only a filtered version of events. Catherine reportedly stressed that William's approach would matter just as much as the documents. If he entered the room angry and accused Camilla outright, the conversation could quickly turn into another painful family argument. Instead, William needed to present the evidence carefully and allow Charles to reach his own conclusion. The issue was not simply who disliked whom inside the family. The documents raised serious questions about whether the king had been receiving accurate information before making decisions about his workload and William's responsibilities. The meeting reportedly took place on a quiet morning at Buckingham Palace. William arrived carrying the folder given to him by the secretary. He placed it on the table in front of Charles and explained that his team had cross-checked schedules, emails, and transfer records. William allegedly told his father that the papers showed what had happened before certain documents reached the king's desk. Charles began turning through the pages one by one. He reportedly saw proposals that had been delayed, altered, or crossed out before he ever had the chance to review them. These did not appear to be ordinary spelling corrections or harmless administrative updates. The changes allegedly affected what Charles was allowed to see and, as a result, which decisions he could reasonably make. Suggestions for William to take on important duties had reportedly disappeared before reaching the king. Charles eventually placed one hand on the folder and remained silent. William did not interrupt or push him for an immediate reaction. He simply sat across from his father and allowed him time to process what the documents appeared to reveal. The silence in that room must have felt seriously heavy. Charles was not only looking at altered schedules, he was potentially realizing that important decisions about his health, workload, and family had been shaped by information he never received. When Charles finally spoke, he reportedly said that he could now see the situation clearly and that it could not continue. He then called an emergency meeting with senior advisors and representatives from the offices involved. Camilla was allegedly present at that meeting. She appeared calm on the surface, but her tightly clenched hands reportedly revealed the pressure she was feeling. Everyone in the room supposedly understood that Charles was about to announce a major change. The king reportedly declared that William would officially assume most royal duties carried out on his behalf. He also ordered that all future proposals connected to his schedule be delivered directly to both offices. That new process would make it much harder for one side to delay or change information without the other side knowing. Charles then looked toward his son and reportedly said, "You are ready. I trust you." It was a short statement, but its meaning was huge. William was no longer being treated as someone waiting on the sidelines. He was being formally trusted to carry a much heavier share of the monarchy's work. Camilla allegedly attempted to explain that the entire situation had resulted from an administrative error. Her voice was reportedly unsteady as she spoke, but Charles raised his hand and stopped the explanation before it could develop into a longer argument. He had already made his decision, and according to the account, there would be no further debate. The king considered the matter settled. One clear ruling cut straight through months of delays, vague excuses, and behind-the-scenes tension. Afterward, Camilla was reportedly removed from several important events and no longer participated directly in decisions about royal duties. If true, it represented a sharp loss of influence. The authority she had allegedly tried to protect had slipped away in a single meeting. William finally assumed the responsibilities that palace advisors had supposedly proposed for him months earlier. Catherine remained beside him as the transition began. Charles, although tired, reportedly appeared calmer after handing over a large part of the workload. The transfer of responsibilities had allegedly been slowed for months, but once the paper trail was exposed, everything changed almost overnight. Instead of a gradual and carefully managed transition, the palace was pushed into making an immediate decision because the delays themselves could no longer be defended. The wall had finally cracked. What makes the alleged situation especially striking is that the effort to slow William's rise may have accelerated the exact outcome it was supposedly designed to prevent. According to this version of events, Camilla wanted to preserve her influence by keeping Charles at the center of royal activity for as long as possible. Yet the aggressive control of information allegedly created a clear paper trail. Edited documents, delayed reports, and altered schedules left behind evidence that could eventually be compared with the originals. If the transition had been allowed to happen naturally, William might have accepted additional duties little by little. Charles could have gradually stepped back, while Camilla's influence slowly became less central. That process might have taken months or even years. Instead, the alleged interference forced Charles to act quickly and decisively. The result was a faster and more complete loss of influence than a normal transition might ever have caused. That is the bitter irony at the center of the story. This pattern is not limited to royal families. It can be seen in companies, institutions, and powerful organizations everywhere. When someone controls the information reaching a leader in order to protect their position, they often become too confident and push the scheme too far. Sooner or later, conflicting documents appear. Someone preserves an original copy, or a witness decides to speak. Once that happens, the consequences can be far more severe than simply accepting the change that was already coming. William reportedly did not need to create a public scene or launch wild accusations. He followed the trail, gathered the documents, and presented the evidence directly to his father. The papers were allowed to tell the story. Charles allegedly examined the edited documents, understood what they suggested, and made his decision. In that room, the evidence carried more weight than any dramatic confrontation could have. William's quiet approach also protected his father from unnecessary public pressure while the investigation was still incomplete. For William, the experience may have reinforced an important lesson about the kind of leader he wants to become. He did not rush forward based on suspicion alone. He reportedly waited until his team had verified the timeline and compared the altered documents with the original versions. Only then did he approach Charles. That was not weakness, it was discipline. When private family tensions also involve the duties of the head of state, one careless accusation can create damage far beyond palace walls. William's alleged response was controlled, patient, and street-smart. He gathered the receipts, checked every detail, and made his move only when the evidence was solid. In a royal system built on tradition, loyalty, and carefully managed appearances, that measured approach may have been the most powerful move of all. Catherine's role in this alleged palace drama is impossible to ignore. She reportedly became William's steady sounding board, the person who could examine the situation clearly and support him without pushing him into a reckless confrontation. Her advice helped shape the strategy that reportedly worked. Catherine's message was simple. Charles needed to see the truth for himself, not feel that his son was attacking him or trying to force his hand. William therefore entered the meeting with evidence instead of anger. He did not throw accusations around or turn the situation into a loud family showdown. He placed the documents in front of his father and allowed the alleged paper trail to speak for itself. The story also reveals another side of Charles. Despite reportedly facing fatigue and ongoing health challenges, he acted decisively after seeing the evidence. According to the account, he did not make excuses for Camilla or dismiss the seriousness of what the papers appeared to show. Charles reportedly examined the original documents, recognized the alleged interference, and made a decision that prioritized the monarchy's stability and his heir's well-being. That would require serious clarity, especially when the person connected to the controversy was his own wife. He could have delayed the decision, ordered another review, or called the changes an innocent misunderstanding. Instead, according to the unconfirmed story, he called a meeting, announced his decision, and ended the debate. William would now perform most duties on behalf of the king, a change that advisors had allegedly recommended months earlier. Charles could finally follow medical guidance and reduce his schedule without worrying that the institution would suffer. William was ready to step forward, while Catherine remained the steady presence beside him. Camilla, meanwhile, was reportedly removed from the center of decisions involving royal schedules, and her influence over official responsibilities was significantly reduced. However, none of these dramatic details have been officially confirmed. Claims about secret medical reports, altered schedules, or deliberate interference must be treated as allegations rather than established facts. The secretary who reportedly preserved the original documents also took a major personal risk. By keeping unedited copies, he allegedly protected himself while creating the evidence that would later reveal the suspicious pattern. When he handed the folder to William, the situation reportedly changed completely. The truth could no longer be hidden beneath revised schedules, vague explanations, and delayed paperwork. What happened to the secretary afterward, however, remains another unanswered question. Strip away the titles, ceremonies, and palace walls, and this becomes a familiar story about institutional power. Someone fears losing their position, so they begin controlling the information moving around them. At first, that control may be difficult to detect. A document arrives late, a recommendation disappears, or a decision is postponed without explanation. One incident may look harmless, but when it keeps happening, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Eventually, someone checks the receipts. Original papers are compared with final versions, timelines are examined, and witnesses begin speaking. Once the hidden system becomes visible, the person trying to control everything may lose far more than they would have lost by allowing events to unfold naturally. The detail that stands out most is the claim that William had to conduct an internal investigation simply to understand why his father's workload was not being reduced. This was not only a disagreement about royal policy. It was allegedly a son watching his father exhaust himself while being unable to help because the normal process for sharing duties had become jammed. William could see Charles's fatigue, but he supposedly could not understand why every attempt to step in was blocked. That goes beyond politics. It is family. At the heart of the story was a son attempting to protect his father without disrespecting his authority. There was also a stepmother allegedly trying to preserve her position, while Charles remained caught in the middle without knowing the complete story. The situation feels almost Shakespearean. There is an exhausted king, an heir waiting to serve, sensitive information moving through hidden channels, and a struggle over who controls access to power. But instead of ending in tragedy, the account concludes with Charles examining the evidence and making the right call at the right moment. He supposedly trusted William, reduced his own burden, and changed the process that had allowed the alleged interference to happen. The reign slowly taking shape around William is therefore about more than accepting additional engagements. It could signal a new approach to transparency, accountability, and information sharing inside the palace. If this experience happened as described, William will never forget how easily vital information could be controlled. He will understand that strong leadership depends on more than simply trusting the people around you. Clear safeguards matter. Important documents must reach the correct offices. Major decisions require reliable records, and no individual should be able to quietly reshape the information placed before a leader. That lesson may shape how William operates when he eventually becomes king. He could demand stronger communication and fewer hidden channels where important decisions can simply disappear. Most importantly, he reportedly learned that calm persistence can be more powerful than a dramatic confrontation. He followed the trail, gathered the receipts, and waited until the evidence was strong enough to stand on its own. Whether this account is eventually confirmed or not, its central lesson remains powerful. Controlling the truth may protect someone's influence temporarily, but once the paper trail surfaces, the whole game can flip overnight. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and stay tuned for the next royal story.